for all the people that are listening and watching on YouTube. My very special guest today is Sarah Peyton, author, international speaker, and neuroscience educator dedicated to helping you transform your brain into a kinder, cozier place to live. Sarah, how you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you, Zach. How are you doing?
I'm doing extremely well. I want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hop on the Life Coach Zach podcast. I know we don't really know each other that well, but I'm very passionate about consciousness. And it started out with the science of consciousness, reading a lot about Dr. Joe Dispenza and how our thoughts change the physiology in our body and our DNA and neuroplasticity, XYZ, etc. And
Yes.
I'm really excited to speak with you today and to learn about what your expertise is and just have a really good conversation about happiness, because that's really the end goal here, right? Is for all of us
Yes,
to
yes.
increase. Yeah.
Happiness, also possibly meaning, a sense of meaning. The scientists find that some people really like having happiness, that gives their life a sense of being right, and that other people are like, well, happiness is all well and good, but what I really like is meaning. So we can go for either one, and they're both just as nice for our bodies and our immune systems and our brains.
Amazing. Maybe we can even talk about both. I wanted to say thank you so much for sending me this copy of your Resonant Self Workbook, From Self-Sabotage to Self-Care. And I'm really looking forward to going through it and filling it out. There's a ton of engaging activities in here and examples. You speak a lot about neuroscience. For all the people that are listening that don't know much about neuroscience, can you explain neuroscience as simply as possible?
Oh, absolutely. The most wonderful thing about neuroscience is that it has a branch that's called relational neuroscience that lets us study how our brains affect each other, how we are changed by relationship, which is what got me into this world of talking about it all over the world. And because I'm fascinated that we are so affected by one another's brains and beings. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about how we change our brains, change our thoughts, change our brains, change our neurochemistry, but we're also changing it in the people around us when we're changing the way that we talk. And it's sort of like words are, you know how inside the brain the neurotransmitters are what help the neurons talk to each other. It's sort of like words are people's external neurotransmitters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So basically, long story short, neuroscience is how our thoughts and feelings and emotions change the biology of our body. Is that accurate?
Relational neuroscience, yeah. I mean, neuroscience as a whole is an enormous field which takes all kinds of things, including traumatic brain injury and the way that emotional trauma affects us, and what part of the brain does what, and what's the connectome look like, what part of the brains are connected to other part of the brain. And so, yeah, but relational neuroscience is all about how we're changed by first our moms, whoever our mothering person is, whatever gender they are. They are the most important person for a baby in our Western world, and that person's brain has an enormous impact on our brain.
Mhm.
My favorite epigeneticist's name is Moshe Gif, and he works in Toronto, Montreal, and he says that our mother is in every cell of our prefrontal cortex. So the way that our mom treated us and treats herself gets embedded in 8 billion cells inside of our prefrontal cortex. And that's like a lot of influence right there on how our brains work. And so a little bit of what we're doing is we're creating often, I mean, some of us have perfectly delightful and happy mothers, but in terms of happiness, sometimes we need to do a little bit of a mother upgrade for those 8 billion cells.
Absolutely. So, how can someone use neuroscience to optimize their experience, optimize their relationships, and ultimately optimize their life?
Well, The very first thing I think is learning about the importance of self-warmth. That the most important thing is, like, if we were standing beside ourselves, if there were a Sarah standing right here, would she just kind of be radiating warmth and affection and love and care to this Sarah? Or would she be sitting over there judging her and saying, "You're not good enough. You're not doing the right thing. How could you have made that mistake? What are you talking about? That's not what Zach asked." And then, so that's the question. Like, what is this self that's the considering self? How are they with us? And the warmer they are with us, the better our immune system does, and the better our brain does, and the cozier it is inside of these brain bowls that we carry around.
So showing a lot more self-compassion to ourselves. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, and actual genuine affection. Like, we can have compassion for people we don't like very much. Yeah, but what about actual genuine affection for
Genuine
ourselves?
effect, loving ourselves unconditionally.
Yeah, and enjoying ourselves and having some delight in our beings.
Having some delight in our beings,
Yeah,
following our passion and living with purpose and seeking fulfillment and accomplishment and service and providing value to other people. And,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
And and like, if we don't know what our passion is and we don't know what our life path is to be able to follow it, just going, "It's okay, honey." Just like, "Yeah, it's okay.
Mhm.
You still are totally beloved. You are still totally delightful."
Absolutely. It's very ironic that we're talking about this right now because I feel like everything that we've mentioned is about our thoughts because our thoughts create emotions, right? Without thoughts we can't really have emotions. So, how does someone really become more aware of their thoughts and how does someone create a more healthy relationship with the voice inside their head?
Well, a part of what we're talking about is that it may be that our thoughts create our emotions, but it also may be that our bodies are having a response to the world around us, and that's sort of putting into both thoughts and emotions, because our bodies really carry the record of every experience that we've had. And so we can be looking at, well, how do our bodies create our emotions, and how do our thoughts create our emotions, sort of like the bottom up work and the top down work. Both are so important for having a warm and cozy place to live inside of our
Hmm.
brains. So the bodies, our bodies are particularly vulnerable to whatever kinds of physical traumas we've lived
Hmm.
through. What kinds of Well, how have people treated us? Have people been respectful and kind with our bodies? Have there been violations and intrusions? Have we been hurt by other humans? Have we been hurt in automobile accidents? Have we been hurt in natural events, floods, earthquakes? All of these things are going to very much impact our body's sense of whether or not this is a safe world that we live in. And a part of what makes us calm is a sense of safety. So we need to be safe from the bottom up, and we need to be safe from the thoughts down. So part of what happens with trauma in little kids is that whenever we live through anything that's difficult before we're 9 years old, our natural brain pattern is to blame ourselves. If only we were different, the bad thing would not have happened. So we have a kind of a record of our own history of self blame whenever we hear our critical inner voice. If Sarah is standing here and going, "Sarah, what the heck? What are you saying? Why are you saying that?" It's very likely that Sarah as a whole has lived through experiences where she may have received shame, judgment, humiliation for the way that she spoke. And so this voice is trying, the observing voice is trying to make her
Hmm.
safe. And that's really what our critical voices are always doing. They're trying to make us safe and make sure we blend in and fit in with the people around us, the people who are important to us. What are their judgments? How do they see the world? What do they think is important? Our critical inner voice will take their ideas about what's important and begin to kind of try to pressure us. And it can be a cruel pressure, or it can be a warm and supportive and nurturing and encouraging kind of pressure that has a whole different feeling for our bodies of kind of being uplifted and carried
Yeah.
along rather than being the target of our own
Right.
scorn.
And there's so many external circumstances, like you said, our mother, where we grew up, where we live right now, our job, and
Yeah,
it's things that happened to us when we were a kid, trauma, physical, mental, whatever it is. But at the end of the day,
yeah,
there's 8 billion plus people on this earth. And on a macro
yeah,
scale, I feel like the biggest issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, is lack of awareness, because all of
yes, so
everything you're
true.
saying makes so much sense, and it's helping me so much, and I'm learning so much already. We've only been talking for 11 minutes, but for the person that does not meditate, for the person that does not
Yeah,
disidentify from their emotions, from the person that doesn't even
yeah,
realize that they're thinking about the person that doesn't think about what they're thinking about, right? The person that reacts
right.
on their emotion, the person that reacts
Yeah,
impulsively on their thoughts, right? How can
yeah.
someone cultivate more awareness so they can begin this journey of self compassion and relational neuroscience?
What a wonderful question. I noticed myself that I would read about meditating and I'd think, gosh, that sounds like a good idea. Then I'd try to meditate. But as soon as I tried to meditate, I was opening the door for the critical voice. And it was a bit like a bloodbath before I started working on my own brain. So it was like meditation did not seem like a good thing. Thinking about my thoughts did not seem like a good thing. The very best idea for me, it was I grew up before video games. Like I would read compulsively. I was like, okay, if I can get my brain going on a book, then I'm not going to be able to have enough brain energy left over to beat myself up. Nowadays, people use video games and they are so effective at stopping the default mode network, the automatic voice of the brain. So I think the first thing is to remember that it's not truth, it's trauma. Like when our brain is beating us up, it's not truth. We think it's truth, it feels like truth, but it's not truth, it's trauma. And once we start to integrate that, then there's like a kind of a grace that comes, I think. Like somebody just happens to listen to this podcast. It's a moment of grace where they go, "Oh, I really like what Zach's saying. Maybe I could have a little warm curiosity about my
Mhm.
brain. Maybe I could have a little bit of a sense
Yes.
of exploration." Yeah, of exploration, like that meditation is like a journey and adventure into unknown territory filled with dragons, filled with terrible beasts, and and those are the beasts and dragons
Mhm.
of trauma. And maybe it would be a good thing because there's so many good things that come with meditation. Our immune system improves, our mood improves, our reactivity decreases, we're nicer to the people we
Uh-huh.
live with, as long as we're doing the kind of meditation that increases
Love
self
that.
warmth. If we're doing the kind of meditation that just increases our capacity to focus, then we just become better at focusing. We don't become nicer to anybody.
I love that. And I want to thank you so much for one of the things you just said in your answer, is the fact that someone listening to this podcast is going to be like, hey, maybe I should create more awareness around my thoughts. And if that is happening, and I know for a fact it is, it gives me so much more conviction to continue where I'm
Yeah.
heading, right? Because I started this podcast last year, and I'm so thankful and grateful that I'm able to have conversations and connect to people just like you. And I'm getting to
Yeah.
learn, and I'm receiving so much wisdom, and there's other people that are going to learn as well. And it seems like, and this might be a little weird, we're all growing and lifting each other up together. And I don't know what the
Yeah.
catalyst for that is, but what's really important is people like you on this earth, Sarah, and people like me on this earth that want
Mm.
to grow, that want to get better,
Mm.
that want to give love and service and fill our own hearts with peace and joy.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yes.
what's one
Yes.
way that we can fill ourselves up with more peace and joy?
The checking into this possibility Can I turn toward myself with true affection? Is that possible? Because sometimes people have contracts that get in the way of being warm with themselves. So having a curiosity about contracts, unconscious contracts we might have, which is what all of your Resonant Self Workbook is about, can be a way to open the door to self-warmth. So, for example, I've worked with people who have a contract. I will not be warm to myself in order to make sure that I am authentic and to make sure that I do not become consumed in inauthentic warmth. It's much better to be authentic and cold than it is to be inauthentic and warm. And those people have lived through someone being inauthentically warm with them. It's like it's made warmth toxic. They've got it entangled in their brain that warmth equals inauthenticity. And so then you say, okay, is this no matter the cost to you? You're going to believe that warmth equals toxicity. And they go, yeah, no matter the cost to myself. Then we can say, is this a good contract? Is this a good contract for you to have? Is this really life-serving? And oftentimes they'll say, gosh, no, it's not life-serving at all. Let me let go of that contract. I release you from this contract. I revoke this vow. I give myself the blessing to get that warmth and toxicity are not necessarily the same thing, that it's okay to be warm without it being cloying or overly sweet or inauthentic or toxic. It's just warmth. It's just a good thing that's good for my immune system and good for my brain and good for me. So that's an example of some of the kinds of work that we can do that start to open the door to more capacity and more willingness and more
I
ability.
love that. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess that thought about being warm to yourself. And you continue to use the word warmth, and it's such a powerful word. You know, it combines love and appreciation and so many other emotions all in one. And
Comfort,
love that. Any
tenderness.
more? Comfort, tenderness.
Yeah. Comfort, tenderness, affection, sweetness, well-being, relaxation.
Relaxation is a good one because as you were talking, I released so
Yeah.
much tension from my body, and I'm fully
Yeah.
present here in this conversation. Sarah, what are some of the things
Oh.
that you're passionate about and that you are trying to learn more about?
Just recently, I've been very interested in some new research that's come out about hatred and how close hatred is to love. And so I've become very, very interested in what are the moments when our love turns to hatred? What is the disbalance that's occurring? How is there a betrayal that needs to be named? And I find I'm just, yes, it has me completely fascinated that the researchers have found hatred and found it in the brain, and that it is almost identical to love, except for one small detour in the path that it travels. So that's one of the things that I'm really interested in, because I really I really like authenticity. Like, what is what is it in our brains that makes us petty? What is it that makes us jealous? What is it that makes us envious? What is it that gives us hatred? Like, what happens if we have a radical self-warmth that even encompasses those things that we often think of negatively or judge ourselves for? What happens if we start to acknowledge that these things come from trauma and from relational disbalance and from loss and from not being able to grieve? I'm always interested in, what do brains do when they don't get to grieve? They often go towards negativity and towards blame. So accompanying one another in grief also seems like such an incredibly important and life-serving thing that we often don't think about when we're thinking about, how can I be happier? You know, it's sort of paradoxical. The way we can be happier is to grieve more, because as soon as we get to do our grieving, there's sort of this natural lightness that starts to
What are
reassert
the highs
itself.
without the lows? What's happiness without
Mm-hmm.
sadness? What's
Yeah.
love without hate? And it's so ironic also that you were talking about this study or research that just came out about love and hate and how similar they are. And when we say similar, you mean similar as far as brain waves and physiologically inside our body?
Yeah. Well, it's actually what track do we see the energy and information
Got it.
traveling on in the brain in
Interesting.
fMRI
And, the
pictures?
word love is a 4-letter word and the word hate is a 4-letter word. And, we can say
Yeah.
the word till we're blue in the face, but there are no proper words that can articulate what it actually means. The word hate is just a
Yeah.
post sign. And the way someone interprets hate and the way
Yes.
someone else interprets hate are two different completely things. And we use love and hate as opposites, as polarizing emotions, but it's really impossible to encapsulate or verbalize exactly what that word
Yeah.
means. And
Yeah. And you would think that since we think of them and feel them as opposites, that, love would be here and hate would be here. That but instead they're just so close. I'm completely fascinated. But
incredible.
I'm fascinated by humans, Zach.
We are a very unique species. And are we? Let me ask you a question. I'm not really sure. This is something I just thought about. Are we the only species in the kingdom that can be aware of our own awareness?
Well, they do these wonderful and very sweet pieces of research with animals and mirrors to
Mm-hmm.
see which animals notice that they have a reflection, and that they can put like a white mark on animals' foreheads and see who goes to rub it off when they see themselves in the mirror. And that seems to imply that we share a consciousness of self with some animals. Dogs don't notice, supposedly, except for people who really like dogs say that the dogs notice, but they just don't care that they have a white mark on their forehead.
That makes sense.
But different primates wipe it off, and I think elephants wipe it off and notice it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we are of this world, in a beautiful way. We are mammals, and we are here with our mammal cousins, the animals who have so much to share with us and teach us.
Love that. Love that. Sarah, I want to thank you so much again for taking the time to come on the podcast today. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with today?
Yes, just it's not truth, it's trauma. If your brain is mean to you, it's not truth, it's trauma. Even if you don't know what the trauma is, even if you're like, I've had no trauma, we can actually inherit trauma from past generations. So if we have a cruel voice inside, it's not truth, it's trauma.
It's not truth. It's trauma. Our thoughts are just thoughts. You are you. You're not your thoughts. You're just the awareness of your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's it. To everyone that's listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can learn more about Sarah and connect with her at sarahpeyton.com. That's SARAHPEYTON.com. To all the people watching on YouTube, thank you so much for sticking around till the end. I'm going to drop a couple links below where you can learn more about Sarah, train with Sarah, see some private sessions with Sarah, and also get a copy of a few of her books. Sarah, thank you so much for
Thank
everything.
you.
And if there's anything I can do to help you out, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here with you.